purpose of this video is just to present a brief introduction to Java Server Faces, JSF. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new project in NetBeans. And this project is going to be a Maven web application. We're going to give it the name Simple JSF. Specify where we're going to put this on our local drive and specify the group ID and verify that we have our Glassfish server selected. Let's just take a brief look at the POM XML file that NetBeans creates for us when we create a Maven web application. And the only dependency that we have is our JavaX for our web API. So now let's right-click on our project, select Properties, and we're going to add the Java Server Faces framework. And then under Components, we want to specify Prime Faces. And you'll notice if you look back at your pom.xml file, NetBeans has added our Prime Faces dependency. And this will give us access to the Prime Faces libraries that we need when we're creating our Java Server Faces, and specifically our Prime Faces components. So now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a managed bean. So I'm going to go to Java Server Faces and I'm going to create a JSF managed bean. And a managed bean is just a regular Java class that's registered with JSF, and it helps us to manage the data that we're going to display within our user interface. So you can kind of think of it as the controller in the model view controller architecture. So now we want to give it a class name, and I'm going to call it a Simple JSF Managed Bean. I'm going to specify the project package that I want that class created in. And I can give it a name. And I'm going to call it Simple JSF. I can call it anything I want. And the scope is going to be, these are our choices for the different scopes that we can have for our managed bean. And this is actually saying how long do we want an instance of this class, because a managed bean is a Java class. How long do we want an instance of this Java class to exist? If we specify application, this class is going to the objects is going to live as long as the application is running within the server. Request is only as long as one request from the client. So if you have multiple requests, you can't count on this object living through multiple requests. And session is the one that I most frequently end up using. Session scope is the scope where the instance of this managed bean will last as long as the session lasts. So as long as you have an HTTP session, the instance of this class will exist. And then I select Finish. And this is what NetBeans creates for you. This is the name that we gave our bean. And again, we can change it. We can call it anything we want. And it creates named, which tells our application server that it binds it to JSF. And of course, the annotation session scope says make an instance of this last as long as the session lasts. So let's go ahead and create an attribute. And then let's create a getter class for that attribute. And we know from creating Java classes that generally we're going to have a getter and setter for every attribute in the class. This isn't always true, but most of the time it will be true. So we have created a manage bean. This manage bean has an attribute called message, and we have a get message. And I initialize the message to hello world. Now let's look at see what NetBeans created us in our web pages. So it created a default index.html, and I'm going to delete that because that's not a file that we're going to be using. It creates two XHTML files, index.xhtml and welcomeprimefaces.xhtml. And this is a XHTML page that allows us to it provides a basic layout for prime faces. And again, we're not going to look at that. We're not going to be concerned with that in this video. So all we're going to get concerned about is the index.xhtml. And what we want to do is we want to bind this XHTML file. We want to use information in our managed bean in this file. So this is our view. This is our user interface. This is what our users are going to see. So what we're going to do here is we're going to add a prime faces output label. And what I want to output in this label, so basically it's just going to print a label onto our web page, and the value of this label, I want it to be this message. So I want the message from this managed bean. So the name of my managed bean is simple.jsf. So I'm going to use a pound sign and a curly bracket, an open curly bracket. I'm going to put the name of my managed bean, dot, and I'm going to put message. And then it has a closing curly bracket. That's pound sign, open curly bracket, the name of my managed bean, and because this is an output label, it's going to call the get message. So even though I put message here, it's going to be calling the get message method in my managed bean. So let's run that and see what happens. All right, so this specifies that I have an error. So I go back to my HTML, and of course I forgot to close my bracket. I'm going to run it again. And we get the hello world. And this is prime faces link we have in our XHTML file. So let's go back and look at that, and we have this link. And again, we're not going to concern ourselves with it, so we're going to get rid of that. Now notice, if I go to my managed bean and I get rid of this get method, I'm going to get an error message, and it's going to say that I don't have a get method. and there. So that get is what I use if I'm going to output something on my web page. Now let's see what we would do if we want to actually set our message. So maybe we initialize it to hello world, but we want to change it. Well, we can add a setter message. So if we do, and we want to add a set message, and then in our XHTML file, we could change this to enter your message, and then we can have an input text So now the input text for this is going to be our managed bean message. This one's calling set message. All right, so in order to change the message, one of the things that we'll want to do is put it in a form. And then let's print out that label down here. So what we've done is we have input. We're going to allow the user to enter a message, and then the message that they enter is going to be displayed in this output label. And just to review, recall that for the input text, it's going to call the set message method in the simple JSF managed bean. To output, the framework will execute the simple JSF get message method in the managed bean. So that just gives you a really brief overview of Java server faces and specifically prime faces.